Today, I'm going to share with you absolutely everything you need to know about variations, and stay tuned to the end because I'm going to give you 2 hacks today. The first one is going to be on how to choose the right category for your products so that you can ensure you can actually list your variations in a way, in a certain relationship on one listing. Sometimes that's quite difficult to do if your products are quite different, but you still want them on one listing. I'm going to show you a way to potentially do that. And the second hack, and disclaimer, this one is grey hat, but this is a way to actually use variations to transfer your product reviews if you're ever in that applicable situation. This video does contain a hidden product, so it's going to show up somewhere like this example, but if you're the first to comment below what that product is and the timestamp like this, then you win this video and you stand a chance to win our 2 to 3 potential products that we've researched this month. So here are the critical subjects we're going to be covering, and they're along this red line as timestamps as well, but I recommend you watch this one in sequence. The terminology, types, and requirements for variations, parent listings versus child listings, variation themes, variations in action. So we're actually going to look at specific examples there. How to get the variation theme you need, how to actually create variation listings, PPC ads for variations, and clicking the like button for more sales. So let's start with the basics. So you're going to need variations when you're listing multiple different types of products, but you want to have them all on one listing. And they could differ in terms of color or size, etc. Now, a listing is very often also called a product detail page, and variations are also termed parent-child relationships by Amazon. So if you hear those terms, they're interchangeable. One thing to note here is Amazon thinks that products should be listed on their own product detail pages, their unique listings, unless the products are fundamentally the same. The products only vary in a few specific ways. Customers expect to find these products on the same detail page. The products could also share a single title and it would still make sense, but it doesn't always have to be the same title. And the products would not need entirely different product descriptions. And so where those situations are true, for example, they could share the same title, it would still make sense, etc., then you're probably in the right place. You're looking to do a variation listing. Where a lot of those are not true, then you might be looking at products which are too different from one another, and those should be on their own listings. Single variations. That's, for example, a t-shirt and it just comes in different colors. You also get double variations, and that's perhaps where t-shirts come in different sizes and different colors. Now, your variations on a listing, they are called child listings or child ASINs or even child products. But that's what we refer to with any of those terms as your actual variations on the parent listing, which is something we're going to cover next. The key here, and what I want to cover, is that each of your child listings, that is the variations, they require their own product ID or product identifier. That's going to be your UPC or EAN. Now, a parent listing is simply a placeholder. In fact, customers will not even see this. And for this reason, when you actually create a parent listing, you do not need to fill in a lot of the usual required tabs that Amazon would want you to fill in for a listing. In fact, just when you click variations while setting the listing up, you'll notice a lot of the required red icons will just disappear because they now see this is a parent listing. It's a placeholder. It doesn't need the offer tab, etc., because you're now going to add variations to it. It is simply a place that holds your variations. But another cool thing with parent listings is, of course, all the variations, they're each going to gain reviews from the customers who buy those variations. And those are all able to accrue on your one parent listing. So these are of course your variations, your actual specific products that sit within your parent listing. And these are in fact the ones customers are going to see, sometimes at random or because you're running that variation as a PPC ad, for example. But generally one of these is going to be presented as the front end of your listing within the parent. Once customers click through to it, they're going to be able to see all of the variation options. But with child listings, you are going to have to fill in all of the required information, just as with a normal listing. And you can add multiple child listings to a parent listing. You can also add them whenever you see fit. So you might not add all your variations at this point. You might add them in the future as you extend your product line. Now, before I explain how to actually create a variation listing, it's important you understand Amazon's variation themes. A variation theme defines how your related variations actually differ. So it describes the nature of the difference between those child products or those child listings, those variations. So that could be color or size, but it could also be a double variation. So it could be color and size. And it can even be very specific in some categories like scent or flavor, material, or even configuration. The key here is that this differs per category. So depending on where your product is actually categorized is going to determine the Amazon variation themes that you're going to have available. You can't just list in any category expecting to have the same variation themes as in another category. But here are a couple of examples of variation themes you might see in certain categories. Over here we have apparel. Then next we have electronics and computers, and we have cell phones and accessories. So let's look at some variations in action and how sellers actually use these. So if we use the cell phones and accessories category as an example. So this is a phone gimbal. So it's going to stabilize the phone as you record videos. And it comes in 4 color variations here. We're on the red variation right now, and you can actually see that because it says color red. Also, notice how the title ends with red in brackets. Now, if we change this over to another variation, watch the title and bullet points as we click to the next variation. So now you can see they remain exactly the same, title and bullets, but now the title ends with silver in brackets. And we can also see color silver, but this will be important in a moment. So just remember that the title and bullets remain the same, even though we were changing between variations. But that's a really easy one. That's just color. What if your variations are a bit more complex? Maybe it's more to do with product design. Can you still have those different products on the same listing then? So before we actually create the variation listing, I want to share this strategy with you. And this is important if you ever run into a situation where I can't find the variation theme I need in order to actually list these products together on one listing. For example, maybe you want to sell 2 camera accessory products. They're slightly different in terms of their nature and design, but you just cannot find the theme and your category will not allow you to do that. Let's begin by looking at some real life examples of how sellers do this and how you can replicate this to get the correct variation themes. So let's say you sell these camera cages, but you have 2 different styles, just like Small Rig does in this example. This is the first style, but they have used the variation theme size. So that's the one they've used here. Now they've called this variation normal, and the other one is called super light. But these products are actually significantly different, as you're going to see in a moment. Again, take note of the title here, and let's click on the next variation. So here you can see the small and light version. It's actually very different to the first, not just in terms of size, but the whole design is different. It actually has different functions, different colors, but they have successfully used the size variation theme here to achieve this. The difference between these variations is also evident in the very different titles between the variations, and yet they're still on the same listing. And the bullet points are also slightly different, as you can see here, but they do keep them quite similar, and you should try to do that where applicable. But this is how they look on the first variation, and this is how they look on the second variation. But there are some situations where you cannot implement this type of parent-child relationship. It's just too far removed from what Amazon actually has within its system. For example, here we can actually see it's the same product, but this one has the handle on top as well. It's an attachable handle for the camera cage. Now this would be too different of a product to be on the prior parent listing. But then there are some other cases where Amazon allows a lot more freedom with variations, as you're going to see here. Here, the seller actually uses both color and configuration as the variation theme. And we're going to focus on configuration here. That actually gives the seller the ability to list completely different configurations of the product on that same listing. Now, we've seen this first configuration, but let's click on the other. As you can see, the product, the details, the title, everything is completely different on this other configuration. So what you want to do at this point is find a competitor who's using the variation theme that you do want to use. For example, one of the ones we've covered here. You're going to scroll down on their listing to product information. And here within product info, you can see next to best sellers rank, you can see the category they're in, toys and games, and you can see the full categorization. They've gone all the way down to the subcategory, hobby RC quadcopters and multi-rotors. And you want to click on this final subcategory, hobby RC quadcopters. And this is going to open the best sellers list. And you can see here on the left-hand side, the category tree. So here we can see the main category through all the subcategories down to that final subcategory. And you want to note this down. Note down this categorization because you're going to need it as you begin to list your product as a variation. It's time to actually create your parent listing and child listings within that. And there's 3 ways you can do this. You can upload a flat file, and I'm going to have a link in the description if you do want to do it that way. You can use the variation wizard. I'm not going to cover this today, but you can use the link in the description. There's an article on using that. Or you can create the parent listing on Seller Central and add the child listings to it. And that is the method that probably most of you are going to be using, and that's the one I'm going to show you today. So you're going to head into Seller Central, select add a product from the inventory dropdown. Click I'm adding a product not sold on Amazon at the bottom here. Then you're going to browse for the category that you want. You can search for it as we've done here, or you can actually browse, so you can start moving through those categories as per that list you put together. And once you've categorized all the way down to your subcategory, you're going to click select. Then on the vital info tab, complete the required fields, but you aren't going to need to add a product ID at this point because this is your parent listing. And then on this next tab here, variations, select an appropriate variation theme relevant to the products from this variation theme drop-down list. So within here is where you're going to have your options, and this is going to differ depending on the category you choose. So if you really want something like configuration, that's not going to be in a lot of categories. So you can see why figuring out the category first is very important, because it's going to lead to the correct Amazon variation themes here. Here you're going to be prompted to enter values for your chosen variation theme. So for example, if the variation theme is material, you would enter values like wood or nylon or steel. And these are also those terms that are going to show up next to your title, like red or green, or in this case, it could be wood, nylon, steel. That is your variation difference. Click on add variations. Then a variations matrix comes up, And this is going to allow you to add more detail for each variation combination. A product identifier is needed at this point. So it's an EAN or UPC, and that's for each of your variations. And if you already have a child variation, so you already have a listing that exists for a product that you want to add to this parent, then you can insert the product identifier here, and Amazon should automatically find that within their catalog so you can add it. A seller SKU is going to automatically be generated here if you don't add one. Then provide the offer details for each of the product, the condition, probably new, the price of each variation, and the quantity, which you can set to 1 because they're going to receive 1 unit for that price. And at this point, if you now go back up to the top, you're still like in your parent listing. If you go back to the top and you fill out the other tabs, your images, your description, bullet points, that is going to create like a default across all of these listings. That's why I said earlier, remember when it looks the same, the title, the bullets, everything, even though we're changing between colors, that's because you can set it up like this. So that is one way of doing it. However, from here, you can actually click on save and finish. And at this point, it's going to show up in manage inventory. And you can edit product information at any time on the manage inventory page here. You're just going to click the arrow drop down on that parent listing. You can see the arrow next to variations 2. That's going to drop down your variations. Then you can click on the image of that variation or the edit button. And that's going to take you to the back end of that individual listing of that child product or child listing or variation to this parent, and you're going to be able to adapt that unique listing. Now you will advertise each child variation or child listing separately, and when you're running an ad for a specific variation, that is the variation that's going to show up in the parent, or that is the one that's going to show up to customers on the front end of the listing. Obviously, once they click in, they're going to see all of your variations. But there are 3 strategies here, and these are based on how differently customers search for your variations. Do they search for them all really similarly or quite differently? And secondly, how different are your actual variations? So the first is a focus strategy. This is when your variations are very different in nature, but customers search for them very similarly. So whether they're looking for variation 1, 2, or 3, they use very similar search terms to find those variations. The second strategy is called the spread strategy. And this again is for very different variations. They're different to each other, but they're also searched for very differently by customers. So customers use very different search terms to find these ones. And the third is a single strategy. And this one is best for very, very similar variations, and they are searched for very similarly by customers. Now, I'm not going to go into campaign setup, creating campaigns here. This video, and especially this video series, is going to walk you through exactly how to do that if you want to watch that next. But I am going to tell you about the strategy here. Here, each variation has a campaign targeting the same keywords, your very best keywords. You bid the most on your best-selling variation. You're then going to bid a little bit less on the second best-selling variation, and so on. So the worse a variation does for you, the less you're actually bidding on those keywords, but all of the variations are bidding on the same set of keywords. This allows your very different variations to be visible and to take up places across results for the same keywords. So here's an example. Remember, these are the same parent listing. When you search Sony a7S III cage, you can see this seller is bidding a lot on this keyword for this variation, and it shows up at the top of page 1. So that is our parent listing, but that's the variation showing. They're bidding the most on that variation for this keyword. But if we continue on and actually scroll to page 2 for this keyword, the seller is bidding less on this variation. Remember, this is the same parent listing, but they're bidding less on this variation to that listing. And so it shows up at the top of page 2. So customers who might like either of these, they have the chance to see both as the front end of this listing. And of course, if they click either, then once they're on the listing, they're going to see both these options. But you can see how this type of product, they are both camera cages for a specific camera. They're going to be searched for very similarly using the same types of keywords. But using this strategy, the seller is able to actually place the variations on the front of the listing, but then bid differently on them to take up positions on different pages across those results. Here, your campaigns for each variation, they're going to target different keywords because customers search for those variations differently. You help them find the specific variation they're looking for only. For example, if you search phone case iPhone 13 black, this seller is running ads for this keyword on their transparent or clear variation. So that's one of the variations on their parent listing. But if you search phone case iPhone 13 blue, the seller has ads running for their blue variation. And so in this case, you can see that because the product is slightly different in terms of what the customer might search, the seller's rather choosing, and you could rather choose to actually target the ads for your specific variations towards specific keywords and only show them on the front of your parent listing, only show the customers the exact variation you think they want. Here, you only run an aggressive campaign for your best-selling variation. Since the variations are very similar, customers should still click through and then they will see all of the options there. For example, if you search gimbal phone stabilizer, you can see that this seller is using this strategy. They are representing on the front of the parent listing their best converting color. And so this one is best if your products are very similar. So there's a real difference between them. It might be something really simple, just like color, and you choose to keep it very simple and you're just going to advertise the best converting variation as the front of your parent listing. And that's the only variation that you're running ads for. You run it aggressively across your best keywords. And as promised, my last hack with variations. Now, this one does not always work, but it's worth knowing in case you're ever in this position. Also, it does lie in a bit of a gray area, so do this at your own risk. Do some more research before doing it. But if you're ever stuck with a listing that you can't sell through, or you perhaps are discontinuing and moving on to a newer listing, but you have a newer listing that's related to that product, could even be the same product, but maybe just slightly different. Well, what you can do is sometimes add that older listing or the inactive listing to the new listing as a variation. And when you do that, it transfers the reviews across to that new listing. And once it's on there, what you do is you make that old listing, which is now a variation on this new listing, you make it inactive. So you're going to make it an inactive listing within Manage Inventory, and therefore that variation is not going to show up on your listing, but it's a way that you manage to pull the reviews across. But in terms of this, I only recommend doing it when the products are very related, because that's going to ensure the reviews still kind of make sense on that product. You don't want to have reviews for a cat scratcher on your dog shark life jacket. It's not going to make any sense, and even worse, Amazon could catch on to that. But it is a strategy that does sometimes work and worth knowing. But let me know if you did find the hidden product in this video. Just timestamp and product name if you're the first to do that, and you could win our 2 to 3 potential products that we've researched this month. And before you leave, please do smash that like button. It will help with your sales, and remember to subscribe and turn notifications on. I've also dropped a ton of helpful links below if you want to learn more about any of the aspects we covered here. And remember to follow us on Instagram as well. We post really useful and accompanying infographics there. You can save those, and then when the need comes up, you have them, you can move through that process. But thank you guys again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.